I was sitting in my cramped dorm room at State University staring at the acceptance letter for my dream summer internship at Tech Innovations when my phone buzzed with a call from home. The moment I heard my mother's voice, ice-cold dread filled my stomach. She was crying, but not tears of joy for my achievement. Instead, she delivered words that shattered my world completely. My parents were demanding I withdraw from college immediately because my twin sister Madison had been rejected from the same university. According to them, it was unfair for me to succeed while she failed, and they had already contacted the admissions office, attempting to pull me out without my permission. As I held that internship letter in my trembling hands, I realized my family's toxic favoritism had reached a terrifying new level that could destroy everything I had worked so hard to build. The phone call with my mother lasted 3 agonizing hours, during which she laid out their twisted logic with the conviction of someone who genuinely believed their demands were reasonable. According to Carol, my mother allowing me to continue at State University while Madison attended community college would create an unbearable family dynamic. She painted vivid pictures of Madison's supposed emotional devastation, describing sleepless nights and tearful breakdowns that apparently were all my fault for having the audacity to succeed where my twin had failed. As I listened to her rambling justifications, memories flooded back of a childhood defined by blatant double standards. Madison had always been the golden child, receiving expensive SAT preparation courses that cost $3,000, while I studied with borrowed prep books from the library. When college application time arrived, my parents hired a private college counselor for Madison at $200 per hour, scheduling weekly sessions to craft her essays and select the perfect schools. Meanwhile, I filled out applications alone at the kitchen table after my shifts at the local grocery store. The contrast became even more stark when I remembered how my parents handled our different approaches to academics. Madison spent her junior year of high school attending parties and dating the star quarterback, while I worked 3 part-time jobs to save money for college expenses. When her grades slipped to a 2.7 GPA, my parents hired expensive tutors and convinced her teachers to offer extra credit opportunities. When I maintained my 4.0 average while working 25 hours per week, they warned me about becoming too focused on academics and missing out on the normal teenage experience. My roommate Tyler knocked on the door during the phone call, returning from his evening chemistry lab session. He could immediately sense something was wrong from my pale complexion and the way I was gripping the phone like a lifeline. Tyler had witnessed my work ethic firsthand throughout our freshman year, watching me study until 2 in the morning and wake up at 6 for my campus job at the library. He knew about my scholarships, my Dean's List achievements, and the pride I felt in building my future through sheer determination and effort. The most devastating revelation came when my mother casually mentioned their financial contributions to Madison's dream school. They had donated $15,000 to the university's building fund, believing it would guarantee her acceptance despite her mediocre academic record. When the rejection letter arrived anyway, they immediately blamed biased admissions policies rather than acknowledging Madison's lack of qualifications. According to my mother, the admissions committee had clearly made an error in judgment, and the only fair solution was for me to sacrifice my opportunity to restore family balance. Tyler listened in stunned silence as I recounted the conversation after hanging up. He had met my parents during move-in day and noticed their lukewarm response to my academic achievements compared to their enthusiastic discussions of Madison's social popularity. What he had not understood then became crystal clear now. My family operated on a twisted value system where Madison's happiness took precedence over everything else, including my basic right to pursue education and build a future. The most shocking moment came when my mother revealed something that made my blood run cold. She admitted they had been actively working to limit my opportunities for years, believing that too much success would make me arrogant and create unhealthy competition with Madison. They had intercepted scholarship notifications that arrived in the mail, hiding them from me to prevent applications they deemed unnecessary. College brochures from prestigious universities had been thrown away before I could see them. Most devastating of all, they had deliberately provided incorrect information about our family's financial status on my federal aid applications, reducing my eligibility for need-based assistance, while ensuring Madison received maximum support for her future plans. As the truth sank in, I realized that my parents had been systematically sabotaging my education for years. Every obstacle I had overcome, every challenge I had attributed to bad luck or circumstances, had actually been manufactured by the people who were supposed to support my dreams. The anger that built in my chest was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I was not just dealing with unreasonable parents making an outrageous demand. I was confronting a deliberate conspiracy to control and limit my potential in order to protect my sister's fragile ego. Tyler watched me pace around our small room, processing the magnitude of what had been revealed. He knew that this was not just about college enrollment or family drama. This was about my fundamental right to control my own life and future. The acceptance letter for the summer internship still lay on my desk, representing everything I had worked toward and everything my parents were now trying to destroy. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was finally beginning to understand the true scope of what I was fighting against. The psychological warfare began the very next morning when my parents arrived on campus unannounced. I was eating breakfast in the dining hall with my study group when Carol and Robert marched through the entrance like they owned the place, scanning the room until their eyes locked onto mine. The expression on my father's face was one of grim determination, while my mother looked like she had been crying for hours. Other students turned to stare as they approached our table with the purposeful stride of people on a mission. Without any greeting or acknowledgement of my friends, my father pulled out an empty chair and sat down heavily. Robert was a successful businessman who was accustomed to controlling meetings and getting his way through sheer force of personality. He placed a folder on the table and opened it to reveal official-looking documents, speaking in the authoritative tone he used with his employees. According to him, they had spent the entire night researching my options and had prepared a comprehensive plan for my immediate withdrawal from State University. The scene they created was mortifying. Other students at nearby tables stopped eating to watch the drama unfold, while my study group members sat in uncomfortable silence. Emma David and Anna had become close friends over the semester, and they knew how hard I worked to maintain my grades while managing financial stress. Seeing my parents treat me like a wayward child who needed to be rescued from his own poor decisions was both humiliating and infuriating. Carol took over the conversation with a performance worthy of daytime television. She spoke about family loyalty and the importance of sibling relationships, her voice rising just enough to ensure nearby tables could hear every word. According to her emotional monologue, I was being selfish and cruel by pursuing my education while Madison suffered at home. She described in vivid detail how my sister had locked herself in her bedroom for days, refusing to eat or speak to anyone because of the unbearable shame of her rejection. My father supported her emotional appeal with practical threats. He reminded me that they had contributed $7,000 to my first-year expenses and threatened legal action to recover those funds if I did not comply with their demands. Robert pulled out his phone and showed me a text conversation with a lawyer friend claiming they had grounds to sue for financial fraud since I had accepted their money under false pretenses. The implication was clear: either I withdrew voluntarily, or they would make my life miserable through costly, legal battles I could not afford to fight. The harassment continued throughout the day, as my parents stationed themselves in various campus locations where they knew I would appear. When I tried to attend my afternoon literature class, they were waiting outside the building with Professor Williams, my academic advisor. They had convinced him they needed to discuss a family emergency that required my immediate departure from school. Professor Williams looked confused and concerned, as he tried to balance their demands with his responsibility to protect my academic interests. The most disturbing aspect of their campaign was how they manipulated every interaction to portray me as the unreasonable party. When campus security approached them for disrupting activities in the library, my mother broke down in tears and explained that they were simply trying to help their troubled son make better decisions. She painted a picture of a family in crisis, with one child thriving while the other suffered, and parents desperately trying to restore harmony and fairness. Madison joined their efforts through video calls that my parents initiated in public spaces. They would call her during lunch, or while I was studying in common areas, putting the phone on speaker so everyone could hear her tearful pleas for family unity. My sister had perfected the art of emotional manipulation over the years, and she deployed every technique in her arsenal. She spoke about childhood memories and shared dreams, reminding me of times when we had supported each other through difficult situations. The residence hall director, Sarah, began documenting the disruptions after receiving multiple complaints from other students and staff. She had dealt with helicopter parents before, but the intensity and persistence of my family's campaign was unusual, even by her standards. Sarah scheduled a meeting with me to discuss the situation and offer resources for students dealing with family pressure. Her professional demeanor and genuine concern provided a stark contrast to my parents' emotional manipulation. Financial aid counselor Mark became another unwitting participant in their scheme when they visited his office claiming to update my aid information. They attempted to change my contact information so that all communication would go through them instead of directly to me. Mark found their behavior suspicious and refused to make changes without my written consent. But their visit revealed the extent of their willingness to interfere with my administrative relationships. The most painful part of their campaign was watching how it affected my relationships with friends and faculty. People who had respected my independence and maturity began treating me with a mixture of pity and confusion. Some assumed there must be legitimate family problems I was not sharing, while others seemed uncomfortable being caught in the middle of what appeared to be a deeply personal family dispute. By the end of the week, my parents had contacted every aspect of my campus life. They had spoken with professors, administrators, resident advisors, and even the librarian who supervised my work-study job. Each conversation followed the same pattern. They presented themselves as concerned parents dealing with a stubborn child who was making poor decisions that would hurt his family. The cumulative effect was exhausting and demoralizing, as I found myself constantly defending choices that should have been mine alone to make. The campaign reached its crescendo when they arranged a video conference with extended family members who began calling me with disappointed lectures. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins who had always been supportive suddenly questioned my character and priorities. They had been told that I was selfishly abandoning family values and choosing personal ambition over sibling loyalty. The people I had counted on for emotional support were now part of the pressure campaign, convinced that I was the problem that needed to be solved. The escalation to financial warfare began on a Monday morning when I received an automated email from the university's billing department. My parents had withdrawn the remaining $3,000 they had contributed to my spring semester expenses, leaving me with an outstanding balance that threatened my enrollment status. The message was coldly professional, informing me that payment was due within 10 business days, or my registration would be suspended pending resolution of the account. Panic set in as I realized the implications of their action. I had budgeted carefully for the semester, accounting for their promised contribution, along with my financial aid package and work-study earnings. Without that money, I would need to secure an emergency loan or risk being forced to leave school anyway. The timing was deliberate and cruel, coming just weeks before final exams, when my focus should have been on academic performance rather than financial survival. Robert's business acumen became a weapon, as he systematically dismantled the support systems I had built to maintain my independence. He canceled my health insurance coverage through his company's family plan, claiming I was no longer eligible since I had chosen to prioritize school over family relationships. My car insurance was terminated the same day, leaving me unable to drive to my off-campus job at the electronics store. Even my phone service was cut off, isolating me from potential employers and making it nearly impossible to manage the crisis. The attack on my employment was particularly devastating. Robert called my supervisor at the electronics store, Chris, and delivered a carefully crafted story about my mental health struggles. He claimed I had been experiencing severe psychological problems related to academic pressure and family stress, suggesting that I posed a potential risk to customers and coworkers. According to his fabricated narrative, I had been making increasingly erratic decisions and might require professional intervention to ensure everyone's safety. Chris had hired me 6 months earlier based on my reliability and technical knowledge, and we had developed a good working relationship. However, he was naturally concerned when a parent called with such serious allegations about an employee's stability. The conversation left him confused and worried, unsure whether he should continue my employment while these issues were supposedly being resolved. My parents had weaponized his concern for workplace safety against my financial security. Madison amplified their efforts through social media, posting carefully crafted content that portrayed herself as the victim of my selfishness. Her posts featured emotional captions about sibling loyalty and family bonds, accompanied by old photos of us together during happier times. She wrote about feeling abandoned and betrayed by the person who was supposed to understand her better than anyone else in the world. Her friends responded with supportive comments that reinforced her victim narrative, creating a public record of my supposed cruelty. The social media campaign was particularly effective because it reached mutual friends from high school who were not familiar with the full context of our family dynamics. They saw only Madison's tears and emotional posts, naturally sympathizing with someone who appeared to be suffering while her brother pursued selfish ambitions. Several of them reached out to me with messages expressing disappointment and encouraging me to reconsider my priorities. Bank loan officer Janet became my lifeline during this financial crisis. She was a professional who had seen families weaponize money before, and she recognized the signs of financial abuse in my situation. Janet helped me understand my options for emergency student loans and connected me with resources for students facing unexpected financial hardship. Her calm professionalism and practical advice provided stability during a time when everything else in my life felt chaotic and uncertain. My dormitory friends stepped up in ways that restored my faith in human decency. Jake offered to share his meal plan to ensure I would not go hungry while my finances were in turmoil. Rachel researched scholarship opportunities specifically for students facing family financial emergencies. Tom used his connections with the Student Employment Office to help me find additional work-study hours that would provide immediate income. Their support stood in stark contrast to my family's deliberate cruelty. Academic success counselor Linda worked with me to understand how the financial crisis might affect my academic standing and graduation timeline. She helped me navigate the complex bureaucracy of emergency aid applications and connected me with campus resources I had not known existed. Linda's expertise and advocacy ensured that my financial problems would not automatically translate into academic failure, giving me hope that I could weather this storm without destroying my educational future. The most shocking escalation came when I discovered that my parents had forged my signature on withdrawal paperwork and submitted it to the registrar's office. I learned about this devastating development only when Professor Williams approached me after class with a confused expression, asking about my plans for completing the semester. According to the paperwork he had received, I was withdrawing immediately due to personal family circumstances that required my full attention. My heart sank as I realized the magnitude of what they had done. Forging my signature was not just unethical, it was criminal. They had committed identity theft in their desperate attempt to force my compliance with their demands. The registrar's office had processed the paperwork as legitimate, and I now had 48 hours to prove the forgery before my withdrawal became permanent and I lost all credit for the semester's work. The walls felt like they were closing in as I faced the reality of my situation. My parents had systematically attacked every aspect of my independence, financial support, employment, housing, insurance communication, social relationships, and now my academic enrollment itself. They had weaponized their parental authority and financial resources to create a crisis so severe that compliance might seem like the only viable option. But as I stared at the forged withdrawal paperwork in Professor Williams's office, something shifted inside me. The anger and fear that had been building for days crystallized into determined resolve. My parents had crossed a line from emotional manipulation into criminal behavior, and I was no longer willing to be a passive victim of their campaign. The time had come to fight back with everything I had. The campus police station was located in a brick building near the student center, and I had never imagined I would need their services during my college career. Detective Morgan was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor who had seen enough domestic disputes to recognize the seriousness of my situation immediately. When I placed the forged withdrawal paperwork on her desk and explained how my parents had been systematically sabotaging my education, her expression grew increasingly concerned. Filing a police report for identity theft and fraud felt surreal, like I was crossing a line into territory from which there would be no return. Detective Morgan took detailed notes as I described the escalating campaign of harassment and financial manipulation, asking specific questions about dates, witnesses, and documentation. She explained that forgery was a serious felony in our state, particularly when it involved official educational documents, and that my parents could face significant criminal penalties if the case went to trial. The investigation process moved faster than I had expected. Campus security reviewed surveillance footage from the administrative building, identifying clear evidence of my parents accessing areas where they had no legitimate business. The recording showed my father entering the registrar's office and spending nearly 30 minutes in conversation with staff members, followed by my mother visiting the same office the following day. Their unauthorized presence in secure administrative areas supported my claims about their interference with my enrollment. Student legal aid attorney Patricia was assigned to my case through the university's free legal services program. She was a recent law school graduate who specialized in education law and family disputes, and she immediately recognized the complexity of my situation. Patricia explained that my parents' actions constituted multiple violations of both criminal and civil law, giving me several avenues for legal recourse if I chose to pursue them. Campus counselor Dr. Rodriguez helped me understand the psychological dynamics underlying my family's behavior. During our sessions, she introduced me to concepts like emotional manipulation, financial abuse, and scapegoating that provided a framework for understanding what I had endured. Dr. Rodriguez had worked with numerous students dealing with toxic family relationships, and she validated my feelings while helping me develop strategies for protecting my mental health during the legal proceedings. Computer lab technician Kevin became an unexpected ally when Patricia requested a forensic analysis of my digital accounts. Kevin discovered that my parents had been monitoring my email, social media, and even GPS location through family tracking apps I had forgotten were installed on my devices. The extent of their digital surveillance was staggering, revealing years of privacy violations that supported my claims about their controlling behavior. Madison's former best friend Ashley reached out to me through Facebook with information that would prove crucial to my case. She had witnessed our family dynamics during high school and could testify to the preferential treatment Madison received compared to my experience. Ashley described specific incidents where my parents had intervened to solve Madison's problems while leaving me to handle similar challenges alone. Her willingness to speak honestly about what she had observed provided external validation of the double standards I had endured. The most devastating discovery came when Detective Morgan's investigation revealed that my parents had intercepted and hidden acceptance letters from other universities during my senior year of high school. Working with postal investigators, she uncovered evidence that mail intended for me had been regularly diverted to their personal control. 3 prestigious universities had accepted me with full scholarship offers, but I had never received those opportunities because my parents had stolen my mail to prevent me from having choices they could not control. Learning about the stolen acceptance letters felt like discovering that my entire life had been built on a foundation of lies. I could have attended better schools with full financial support, avoiding the financial stress and limited options that had defined my college experience. My parents had not just sabotaged my current situation. They had stolen years of potential opportunities to ensure I remained dependent on their support and control. Patricia helped me understand the legal implications of the mail theft. Intercepting someone else's mail was a federal crime, and stealing acceptance letters constituted mail fraud with serious penalties. The discovery transformed my case from a family dispute into a federal investigation, bringing in postal inspectors and FBI agents who specialized in mail-related crimes. My personal crisis had escalated into a major criminal investigation. Ashley's testimony provided crucial context for understanding my family's motivations. She described conversations where my mother had explicitly worried about me becoming too successful and overshadowing Madison's achievements. According to Ashley, Carol had frequently complained that my academic success made Madison feel inadequate, and she had openly discussed strategies for keeping me humble and grounded. The surveillance mail theft and financial manipulation were not impulsive reactions to current events. They were part of a long-term campaign to control my potential. Dr. Rodriguez worked with me to process the emotional impact of these revelations. Discovering that my parents had systematically sabotaged my future for years was traumatic in ways I had not anticipated. The grief was intense as I mourned not just for the opportunities I had lost, but for the loving family relationship I had believed existed despite our problems. The people I had trusted most in the world had been actively working against my best interests for years. Kevin's forensic analysis revealed additional evidence of my parents' digital surveillance and control. They had been reading my private messages, monitoring my location, and even accessing my academic records through accounts they had created using my personal information. The violation of privacy was comprehensive and sophisticated, suggesting they had been planning and implementing their control measures for much longer than I had realized. Detective Morgan's investigation also uncovered financial irregularities related to the scholarship funds that had been stolen from me. Bank records showed that money intended for my education had been diverted to accounts controlled by my parents, then used to support Madison's expenses and lifestyle. The theft was not just about controlling my opportunities. It was about redistributing resources to benefit their favored child at my expense. As the evidence mounted, I realized that I was not dealing with parents who had made poor decisions under stress. I was confronting people who had engaged in years of criminal behavior to maintain control over my life and protect Madison from natural consequences of her choices. The investigation had revealed a pattern of abuse so comprehensive and deliberate that it would be impossible to repair our relationship through simple communication or family therapy. The digital forensics analysis conducted by the FBI's Cyber Crimes Unit revealed the true scope of my parents' surveillance and financial manipulation. Agent Collins, who specialized in interstate fraud cases, explained that my family's activities constituted a sophisticated scheme that violated multiple federal laws. The evidence included years of email interception, unauthorized access to my financial accounts, and systematic theft of scholarship funds that had been intended for my education. Forensic accountant Richard was brought in to analyze the complex financial trail my parents had created to hide their theft. His investigation revealed that over $28,000 in scholarship money, had been diverted from accounts in my name to accounts controlled by my parents. They had then used these funds to pay for Madison's expenses, including her car payments, spring break trips, and the down payment for her apartment. The money that should have secured my education had instead funded my sister's comfortable lifestyle. High school guidance counselor Mrs. Thompson emerged as a crucial witness when Detective Morgan contacted my former school. She had kept detailed records of my parents' interference with my college application process, including documented instances where they had requested information be withheld from me or had provided false information about my interests and goals. Mrs. Thompson had found their behavior concerning at the time, but had been unable to intervene due to their parental rights and authority. The evidence from my high school years painted a disturbing picture of long-term manipulation and control. Mrs. Thompson's records showed that my parents had actively discouraged her from discussing certain scholarship opportunities with me, claiming they wanted to manage my college planning process privately. They had also requested that acceptance letters be mailed to their workplace rather than our home address, giving them complete control over what information I received about my options. My former boss Lucas from the grocery store where I'd worked during high school provided character testimony that highlighted the contrast between my work ethic and Madison's approach to responsibility. He described my reliability, leadership skills, and maturity, noting that I had often worked extra shifts to help struggling coworkers while maintaining perfect attendance. His documentation of my employment history provided clear evidence of my character and commitment to personal responsibility. The Henderson family, who had been our neighbors for over a decade, agreed to testify about the differential treatment they had witnessed between Madison and me throughout our childhood. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson described specific incidents where my parents had celebrated Madison's minor achievements while ignoring my significant accomplishments. They had noticed the disparity in birthday gifts, educational opportunities, and emotional support, but had assumed it was normal sibling difference rather than systematic favoritism. College Dean of Students Dr. Martinez became personally invested in my case after learning about the extent of my parents' interference with my education. She had dealt with difficult family situations before, but the criminal nature of their behavior and the sophisticated methods they had used to manipulate my academic career were unprecedented in her experience. Dr. Martinez worked directly with the legal team to ensure that my academic standing would be protected throughout the investigation and legal proceedings. The most dramatic breakthrough came when Madison finally broke down during her police interview. Faced with overwhelming evidence of the family's criminal behavior and the possibility of being charged as an accomplice, she admitted her knowledge of and participation in their schemes. Through tears and obvious distress, she confessed that she had known about the intercepted acceptance letters, the financial theft, and even the forged withdrawal paperwork. Madison's confession was both vindication and heartbreak. She revealed that she had actively encouraged our parents' sabotage because she was jealous of my natural intelligence and work ethic. According to her tearful testimony, she had felt inadequate compared to my achievements and had convinced herself that I deserved to be held back so that she could have a chance to succeed. Her admission that she had helped forge withdrawal documents and had lied to extended family about my character completed the picture of family-wide conspiracy against my future. The confession session was recorded, and Madison's admissions provided prosecutors with the evidence they needed to file comprehensive charges against all three family members. Her decision to cooperate with investigators in exchange for reduced charges created additional pressure on my parents, who could no longer maintain their narrative of concerned parents trying to help their troubled son. The facade they had maintained for months crumbled under the weight of documented evidence and Madison's testimony. Agent Collins explained that the case had evolved far beyond a simple family dispute into a complex federal investigation involving mail fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy charges. My parents faced the possibility of significant prison sentences and substantial financial penalties if convicted on all counts. The investigation had also triggered audits of their business practices and tax returns, potentially exposing additional criminal activity related to their financial manipulations. Richard's forensic accounting work revealed that the true cost of my parents' sabotage exceeded $50,000 when lost scholarship opportunities, stolen funds, and fraudulent expenses were calculated together. This figure did not include the emotional damages or the impact on my academic trajectory, but it provided a clear monetary value for the harm they had caused to my future prospects. The evidence package assembled by the prosecution team was comprehensive and damning. It included digital surveillance records, financial transaction histories, witness testimonies, forensic analysis of forged documents, and Madison's recorded confession. The case was so strong that Patricia advised me that we could pursue both criminal prosecution and civil litigation with high confidence of successful outcomes. Community reaction to the investigation began to shift public opinion against my parents, as details of their behavior became known through legal proceedings. Robert's business associates and Carol's social circle learned about the criminal charges through local news coverage, causing significant damage to their reputation and standing in the community. The people who had once admired them as successful parents raising accomplished children now saw them as criminals who had destroyed their own family through greed and manipulation. The investigation phase concluded with my parents facing multiple felony charges, Madison cooperating with prosecutors while facing reduced charges, and me finally understanding the full scope of what I had been fighting against. The evidence was overwhelming, the legal strategy was clear, and the momentum had shifted completely in my favor. After months of being on the defensive, I was finally ready to see justice served for years of abuse and manipulation. The criminal charges were filed on a gray Tuesday morning in March, and the courthouse was filled with reporters who had been following the case since news of the investigation had leaked to local media. District Attorney Harrison read the indictment aloud, listing 18 separate felony counts against my parents, including identity theft, mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and criminal harassment. The weight of their crimes seemed to settle over the courtroom like a heavy blanket, as the reality of their situation became undeniable. Family Court Judge Richardson presided over the restraining order hearing, with the stern demeanor of someone who had seen too many families destroyed by manipulation and abuse. The evidence presented by Patricia was overwhelming, and my parents' attorney could offer no legitimate defense for their documented criminal behavior. The judge granted a comprehensive protective order that prohibited my parents from contacting me, directly visiting campus property, or interfering with my educational or employment activities in any way. The FBI's investigation expanded when Agent Collins discovered that my parents' financial manipulations extended beyond scholarship theft into potential tax fraud and money laundering. Bank records revealed suspicious patterns of fund transfers and unreported income that triggered additional federal scrutiny. Robert's business faced investigation by both the IRS and the Securities and Exchange Commission, threatening not only his personal freedom, but also his professional career and financial stability. Grandmother Helen, my father's mother, became my strongest family ally when she learned the truth about what had been happening. She had always wondered about the family dynamics she observed during holiday visits, and the criminal investigation provided answers to questions she had been afraid to ask. Grandmother Helen publicly confronted my parents about their behavior, expressing her shame and disappointment while offering me her complete support and love. The local news coverage began with a story by reporter Amanda Chen, who covered the case as a cautionary tale about parental pressure and toxic family dynamics. Her reporting was fair but thorough, explaining how parents' misguided attempts to protect one child had led them to commit serious crimes against another. The story resonated with viewers who had experienced similar family conflicts, generating widespread discussion about healthy parenting and sibling relationships. My internship supervisor, Mr. Peterson at Tech Innovations, learned about my situation through the news coverage and reached out to offer additional support and mentorship. He was impressed by my resilience and professionalism despite the family crisis, and he worked with his company's legal department to provide character references and employment documentation that supported my case. His backing from a respected technology company added credibility to my claims about my work ethic and potential. The civil lawsuit initiated by Patricia sought damages for the stolen scholarship funds, emotional distress, and future earning potential that had been compromised by my parents' sabotage. Expert witnesses testified about the long-term impact of their actions on my educational trajectory and career prospects, placing a monetary value on opportunities that could never be recovered. The financial exposure from the civil case added to the pressure my parents faced from the criminal prosecution. Madison's participation in court-mandated therapy sessions revealed the psychological damage that years of favoritism and manipulation had caused to our entire family. Dr. Walsh, the court-appointed therapist, explained that Madison had never learned to cope with failure or disappointment because our parents had always intervened to solve her problems. Her jealousy and resentment toward me were symptoms of a deeper dysfunction that would require extensive treatment to address. The investigation into Robert's business practices uncovered additional evidence of unethical behavior that destroyed his professional reputation and client relationships. Several business partners distanced themselves from him as details of his family's criminal activities became public knowledge. Clients canceled contracts, and former colleagues avoided association with someone who had demonstrated such poor judgment and ethical failures in his personal life. Carol faced social ostracism in their affluent neighborhood as news of the criminal charges spread through their community. The woman who had once been admired for her parenting success and family values was now seen as someone who had actively harmed her own child to protect another. Former friends and social acquaintances began avoiding her, and she was asked to step down from her volunteer positions with local charities and organizations. The most satisfying moment of the legal proceedings came when my parents' attorney attempted to negotiate a plea agreement that would have minimized their consequences while requiring me to accept partial responsibility for the family conflict. Patricia rejected their proposal, immediately explaining that the evidence supported maximum prosecution and that I had been the victim of their crimes rather than a participant in family dysfunction. The strength of our legal position allowed us to demand full accountability rather than accepting compromise solutions. Dr. Martinez worked with university administrators to ensure that the legal proceedings would not interfere with my academic progress or graduation timeline. She arranged for alternative testing schedules during court appearances and connected me with tutoring resources to help maintain my academic performance despite the emotional stress of the legal process. Her advocacy ensured that my parents' crimes would not succeed in derailing my education, even temporarily. The community response to the case generated broader discussions about recognizing signs of family abuse and supporting students who faced manipulation or sabotage from their own families. Local colleges implemented new policies for identifying and assisting students whose educational progress was threatened by family interference. My case became a catalyst for positive changes that would help protect future students from similar abuse. As the legal proceedings continued, the full scope of the damage my parents had caused became clear. Beyond the financial theft and emotional abuse, they had undermined my trust in family relationships and my confidence in my own perceptions of reality. The criminal justice system was addressing their legal culpability, but the psychological recovery would take much longer and require ongoing therapeutic support. The reckoning phase concluded with my parents facing the inevitable consequences of their choices while I prepared for a future free from their control and manipulation. Justice was being served through both criminal and civil proceedings, But more importantly, I was finally able to pursue my education and career goals without interference. The legal victory was satisfying, but the personal liberation was transformative. The criminal trial concluded in late spring with my parents accepting plea agreements that resulted in substantial prison sentences and financial restitution. Robert received 3 years in federal prison for mail fraud and identity theft, while Carol was sentenced to 18 months for conspiracy and harassment. Madison received 2 years of probation and community service in exchange for her cooperation with investigators. The judge's comments during sentencing emphasized that parents have a responsibility to support their children's growth rather than sabotage their potential. The recovery of stolen scholarship funds combined with the civil settlement provided financial security that allowed me to complete my education without the stress that had defined my freshman year. The $28,000 in recovered funds plus additional compensation for damages meant that I could focus entirely on academics and career preparation rather than worrying about basic survival. The financial victory was meaningful, but the emotional freedom was even more valuable. My summer internship at Tech Innovations became a launching pad for the career I had always dreamed of pursuing. Mr. Peterson and his team were impressed by my technical skills, work ethic, and resilience in overcoming personal challenges. The internship led to a full-time job offer after graduation, providing the financial independence and professional respect that my parents had tried to prevent me from achieving. Their attempts to sabotage my future had ultimately made me stronger and more determined to succeed. Madison's journey through court-mandated therapy and community college proved to be the best thing that had ever happened to her personal development. Away from our parents' enabling and protection, she was forced to develop genuine skills and self-reliance for the first time in her life. Her community college counselor, Ms. Garcia, worked with her to identify realistic career goals based on her actual interests and abilities rather than inflated expectations. Madison discovered a talent for graphic design and began building a portfolio that reflected her own creative vision rather than our parents' ambitions. The family therapy sessions mandated by the court were difficult, but ultimately productive in establishing healthier boundaries and communication patterns. Dr. Walsh worked with each family member individually before bringing us together for joint sessions focused on accountability and healing. My parents were required to acknowledge the harm they had caused and develop strategies for supporting rather than controlling their children's choices. The process was slow and sometimes painful, but it created the foundation for eventual reconciliation based on mutual respect rather than manipulation. Professor Johnson, who had become my mentor and thesis advisor, invited me to speak at the graduation ceremony about resilience and overcoming adversity. Standing at the podium in my cap and gown, I looked out at an audience that included my grandmother, my friends, Mr. Peterson, and even Madison, who had driven 3 hours to attend my graduation. My parents were serving their sentences, but their absence felt like freedom rather than loss. My relationship with Madison evolved slowly as she developed genuine self-awareness through therapy and personal growth. She wrote me a long letter taking full responsibility for her participation in our parents' schemes and expressing genuine remorse for the pain she had caused. Her apology was specific and heartfelt, acknowledging not just her actions, but the underlying jealousy and entitlement that had motivated them. We began rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect rather than competition and favoritism. The graduation ceremony became a celebration of not just academic achievement, but personal triumph over systematic oppression and abuse. My thesis on cybersecurity ethics was selected for departmental honors, and my GPA qualified me for summa cum laude recognition. These achievements felt especially meaningful because they had been earned despite rather than because of my family circumstances. Every award and recognition represented a victory over those who had tried to limit my potential. My new girlfriend Sophie, whom I met during my senior year, represented the possibility of healthy relationships based on equality and mutual support. She was a psychology major who understood the importance of communication boundaries and emotional health in building strong partnerships. Our relationship developed naturally without manipulation, jealousy, or attempts to control each other's choices. Sophie's presence in my life highlighted how different healthy relationships felt compared to the toxic dynamics I had grown up accepting as normal. The job at Tech Innovations exceeded my expectations in every way. My colleagues welcomed me based on my skills and character rather than family connections or social status. The work was challenging and rewarding, involving cybersecurity projects that protected people from exactly the kind of digital manipulation and fraud my parents had perpetrated. There was poetic justice in using my technical abilities to fight against the types of crimes that had been committed against me. Madison's transformation continued as she completed her associate degree and transferred to a 4-year university to study graphic design. She supported herself through part-time work and financial aid, learning the value of personal effort and responsibility that had been denied to her throughout her childhood. Our parents' overprotection had actually hindered her development, and she flourished once she was allowed to face challenges and solve problems independently. The broader impact of our case led to policy changes at universities across the state regarding family interference with student records and enrollment. My story became part of training materials for administrators, counselors, and security personnel who needed to recognize signs of family abuse and manipulation. The legal precedents set by our case provided stronger protections for students facing similar situations, ensuring that my suffering had contributed to positive changes that would help others. As I stood in my new apartment looking at the framed diploma on my wall and the job offer letter that had started this entire journey, I reflected on the profound life lessons that had emerged from this painful experience. True success comes from personal integrity, hard work, and surrounding yourself with people who support your growth rather than sabotage it. Family love should uplift and encourage, never manipulate or destroy. Sometimes protecting your future requires setting firm boundaries with toxic people, even when they share your DNA and claim to love you. The most important lesson was understanding that my worth was never determined by my parents' approval or by comparison to Madison's achievements. I had spent years seeking validation from people who were fundamentally incapable of providing it because of their own dysfunction and toxicity. Breaking free from their manipulation allowed me to develop genuine self-confidence based on my own values, accomplishments, and relationships with people who appreciated my authentic self. My parents eventually completed their prison sentences and began the long process of rebuilding their lives with the understanding that manipulation and control would never again be tolerated in our family relationships. They attended therapy, made restitution for their crimes, and gradually demonstrated genuine remorse for the harm they had caused. The possibility of reconciliation remained open, but it would be based on their actions rather than their words, and it would happen on my terms rather than theirs. Looking toward the future, I felt optimism and excitement about possibilities that had once seemed impossible. My career was launching successfully, my relationships were healthy and supportive, and I had developed the skills and confidence necessary to protect myself from manipulation and abuse. The people who had tried to limit my potential had ultimately forced me to discover strength and resilience I had never known I possessed. The final chapter of this story was not about revenge or bitterness, but about healing, growth, and the triumph of authentic relationships over toxic ones. I had learned to surround myself with people who celebrated my successes, supported my goals, and respected my autonomy. The contrast between healthy and unhealthy relationships became a guide for all my future interactions, ensuring that I would never again accept manipulation disguised as love. Standing at the beginning of my professional career, surrounded by friends who had become my chosen family, I realized that sometimes the greatest gift abusive people can give you is forcing you to become strong enough to live without them. My parents' attempts to control my destiny had backfired, completely pushing me toward a life of independent success and genuine happiness that exceeded anything they had ever imagined for me. Have you ever had to set firm boundaries with family members who tried to control your life choices? Sometimes the people closest to us can become the biggest obstacles to our growth and happiness. Learning to protect your dreams and goals, even from those who claim to love you, is one of the most important skills you can develop. If this story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments about how you have handled family pressure or manipulation in your own life. Thank you for listening to my story and allowing me to share this difficult but ultimately empowering journey with you. I hope that sharing these experiences might help someone else recognize the signs of family manipulation and find the courage to protect their future. Please like this video. If it touched your heart, subscribe for more stories about overcoming adversity and finding strength in difficult situations, and share this message with anyone who might benefit from knowing that it is possible to break free from toxic family dynamics and build a life based on your own values and dreams. Remember that your potential belongs to you, and no one has the right to sabotage your future to protect their own comfort or ego. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and your family is to refuse to participate in dysfunction, even when that choice requires courage and sacrifice. Your dreams are worth protecting, your boundaries are worth defending, and your authentic self is worth celebrating regardless of who approves or disapproves of your choices.